The bar was dimly lit, the kind of place where the air smelled like stale beer and the walls seemed to hold decades of secrets. It was a quiet night, the kind where the regulars sat in their usual spots, nursing their drinks and exchanging stories. But the calm was shattered the moment the door swung open, and a group of bikers walked in. They were loud, their boots clattering against the wooden floor, their leather jackets adorned with patches that screamed rebellion. At the far end of the bar, a man sat alone. He was tall, with a quiet presence that seemed to command respect without effort. His military haircut and the way he carried himself hinted at a life of discipline and service. He had just returned from deployment, and this was his first night out in months. All he wanted was a drink and a moment of peace. But peace was the last thing he would get. The bikers noticed him almost immediately. Their eyes narrowed, and their laughter turned into low murmurs. One of them, a burly man with a beard that hid most of his face, pointed in the soldier's direction. "What's he doing here?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The soldier didn't react. He kept his eyes on his drink, his hands steady. He had faced far worse than a few drunk bikers, and he wasn't about to let them ruin his night. But the bikers weren't done. They swaggered over to his table, their presence looming like a storm cloud. "You lost, boy," the bearded one said, his voice loud enough for the whole bar to hear. "This ain't no place for your kind." The soldier looked up, his expression calm but firm. "I'm just here for a drink," he said, his voice even. The bikers laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You hear that, boys? He's just here for a drink," the bearded one said, mimicking the soldier's tone. "Well, this is our bar, and we don't serve your kind." The tension in the room was palpable. The other patrons watched in silence, some out of fear, others out of curiosity. The bartender, an older man with a weathered face, looked torn between intervening and staying out of it. The soldier took a deep breath, his training kicking in. He knew how to handle situations like this: stay calm, don't escalate, and if things got out of hand, be ready to defend yourself. But he also knew that words could be just as powerful as actions. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his voice steady. "I served this country, and I just want to enjoy my night." The bikers didn't care. They circled his table, their faces twisted with anger and hatred. "You think you're tough, huh?" the bearded one spat. "Why don't you step outside with us, and we'll see how tough you really are." The soldier looked around the bar, his eyes meeting the gazes of the other patrons. Some looked away, ashamed. Others seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. "All right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let's step outside." The bar fell silent as the soldier and the bikers made their way to the door. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was certain: this night would be one they would never forget. As the soldier stepped outside with the bikers, the cool night air hit his face, sharp and bracing. His mind, however, was far from the present moment. It wandered back to where it all began, to the streets of his childhood, to the struggles that had shaped him into the man he was today. He grew up in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place where hope was a rare commodity. His parents worked tirelessly to provide for the family, but money was always tight. Despite the challenges, they instilled in him a strong sense of right and wrong, of dignity and respect. "You're better than this," his mother would tell him whenever he came home frustrated after another day of being bullied or overlooked. "Don't let the world harden your heart." Those words stayed with him, even when the world seemed determined to break him. As a teenager, he saw friends fall into the traps of drugs and crime, but he refused to follow. He had bigger dreams. He wanted to make something of himself, to prove that where you came from didn't have to define where you were going. Joining the military was his way out. It wasn't an easy decision, leaving his family behind, stepping into a world that demanded discipline and sacrifice. But he was ready. He wanted to serve, to be part of something greater than himself. Boot camp was grueling, both physically and mentally. He was one of the few black recruits in his unit, and the challenges didn't stop at the physical drills. There were moments when he felt isolated, when the weight of prejudice threatened to crush his spirit. But he pushed through, driven by the belief that his service would mean something, that it would make a difference. Over the years, he earned the respect of his peers and superiors. He became known for his calm under pressure, his ability to think clearly in the most chaotic situations. He deployed multiple times, facing dangers that most people couldn't imagine. He saw friends fall, witnessed the horrors of war, and carried the scars, both visible and invisible, of his service. But through it all, he held on to the values his parents had taught him. He believed in the power of kindness, in the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. And now, as he stood face to face with a group of bikers who saw him as nothing more than the color of his skin, those values were being tested once again. The bikers surrounded him, their faces twisted with anger. The bearded one stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You think you're tough because you wear that uniform?" he snarled. "You're nothing but a—" The soldier cut him off, his voice calm but firm. "I've fought for this country," he said, his eyes locking onto the bikers. "I've seen things you can't even imagine. And I've done it all so that people like you can have the freedom to hate me. But I won't stoop to your level. I won't let you turn me into something I'm not." The biker hesitated, caught off guard by the soldier's words. For a moment, the air seemed to crackle with tension, the kind that could explode into violence at any second. But the soldier stood his ground, his posture steady, his expression unyielding. Inside the bar, the patrons watched through the windows, their breaths held. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear: this was more than just a confrontation. It was a clash of worlds, of values, of everything that divided people. And in that moment, the soldier's past and present collided, setting the stage for a turning point that would change everything. The bearded biker's hesitation didn't last long. His face twisted back into a sneer, and he took a step closer to the soldier, his breath reeking of alcohol and anger. "You think your fancy words mean anything to us?" he spat. "You're just another—" But before he could finish, one of the other bikers, a younger man with a scar running down his cheek, grabbed his arm. "Hold up," he said, his voice low but firm. "Let's hear him out." The bearded biker glared at his companion but didn't shake him off. There was a tension among the group now, a crack in their unity that hadn't been there before. The soldier noticed it too, but he didn't let it show. He kept his focus on the bearded biker, his gaze steady and unflinching. The younger biker, the one with the scar, stepped forward. He was quieter than the others, less eager to throw punches or hurl insults. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, maybe even guilt, that set him apart from the rest. "Why do you care so much about this guy?" the bearded biker growled, turning on his companion. "He's not one of us." The younger biker didn't answer right away. He glanced at the soldier, then back at his leader. "Maybe he's not," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean we gotta do this." The soldier watched the exchange carefully, sensing an opportunity. He didn't know what had sparked the younger biker's hesitation, but he could see that it was genuine. And in that moment, he realized that this wasn't just about him. It was about them, their fears, their insecurities, their need to prove something. The bikers weren't born hateful. They were products of their environment, shaped by years of hardship and disappointment. The bearded biker, for all his bluster, had grown up in a town where jobs were scarce and opportunities even scarcer. He joined the gang because it gave him a sense of belonging, a way to feel powerful in a world that had made him feel powerless. The younger biker, the one with the scar, had a different story. He'd been raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He'd dropped out of school to help support her, but it wasn't enough. When she got sick, he turned to the gang for help. They paid her medical bills, but the cost was his loyalty. The other bikers had their own reasons for being there, some out of anger, others out of fear. But none of them had ever stopped to question why they hated the people they hated. It was just the way things were, the way they'd always been. The soldier's words had struck a chord, not just with the younger biker but with the others as well. They didn't want to admit it, but deep down, they were tired. Tired of the anger, tired of the hate, tired of carrying the weight of their prejudices. The bearded biker, however, wasn't ready to back down. "You're weak," he snarled at the younger biker. "If you can't handle this, then maybe you don't belong here." The younger biker flinched but didn't look away. "Maybe I don't," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean I'm gonna stand by and watch this happen." The soldier saw his chance. "You don't have to," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You can walk away. You can choose to be better than this." The younger biker hesitated, his eyes flickering between the soldier and his leader. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually step aside. But then the bearded biker lunged forward, shoving him out of the way. "Enough of this," he roared, his face red with rage. "You think you can come here and tell us how to live our lives? You think you're better than us?" The soldier didn't flinch. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," he said. "But I do know that hate only breeds more hate. And if you keep going down this path, it's gonna destroy you." The bearded biker didn't respond. He just stood there, his fists clenched, his chest heaving. The other bikers watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Inside the bar, the patrons held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The tension was thick, the kind that could snap at any moment. But for now, no one moved. No one spoke. And in that silence, something shifted. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. The soldier stood his ground, his eyes locked on the bearded biker. He could see the conflict raging behind the man's eyes, the anger, the pride, the flicker of doubt that he was trying so hard to suppress. The younger biker, the one with the scar, stood a few feet away, his hands clenched at his sides, clearly torn between loyalty to his group and the uneasy feeling that had taken root in his chest. The soldier took a deep breath, breaking the silence. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me, not to your friends, not even to yourself." The bearded biker's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. His fists were still clenched, but they trembled slightly, betraying the storm of emotions inside him. The soldier pressed on, his tone steady and measured. "I've been where you are," he said. "Not in the same way, but I know what it's like to feel like the world's against you. To feel like you've got no choice but to fight, to prove you're tough enough to survive. But here's the thing, fighting doesn't make you strong. It just makes you tired. And hate? Hate doesn't make you powerful. It just eats away at you, bit by bit, until there's nothing left." The younger biker shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the soldier and his leader. The other bikers were silent, their expressions unreadable, but the tension in the air was palpable. The soldier's words were hitting a nerve, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The bearded biker finally broke his silence, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you know me?" he growled. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me how to live my life?" "No," the soldier said simply. "I don't know you. But I know what it's like to carry that weight. And I know it doesn't have to be this way." For a moment, it seemed like the bearded biker might lunge at him. His body tensed, his eyes blazing with anger. But then, something unexpected happened. The younger biker stepped forward, placing himself between the soldier and his leader. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "He's right. This isn't who we are." The bearded biker stared at him, his expression a mix of shock and fury. "You're siding with him?" he demanded. "After everything we've been through?" The younger biker didn't back down. "I'm not siding with anyone," he said. "I'm just saying, maybe we don't have to do this. Maybe we can walk away." The other bikers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of what to do. The dynamic of the group was shifting, and they could all feel it. The soldier remained silent, letting the moment play out. He knew that any wrong move could escalate the situation, but he also knew that this was a pivotal moment, one that could change everything. The bearded biker took a step back, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. He looked at the younger biker, then at the soldier, and finally at the ground. For the first time, his bravado seemed to falter. "You're weak," he muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. The younger biker shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm just tired. Tired of the hate, tired of the anger." "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The bearded biker didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said everything. He was tired too. They all were. Inside the bar, the patrons watched in stunned silence. No one had expected this turn of events. The tension that had been building for so long was beginning to dissipate, replaced by something else. Something fragile and uncertain, but undeniably real. The soldier took a step back, giving the biker space. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The seeds had been planted, and now it was up to them to decide what to do with them. The younger biker turned to the soldier, his expression unreadable. "You should go," he said quietly. "Before things get out of hand." The soldier nodded. He didn't argue. He knew when to walk away. But as he turned to leave, he glanced back at the bikers one last time. "It's never too late to change," he said. "Remember that." And with that, he walked away, leaving the bikers to grapple with the weight of his words. As the soldier walked away, the younger biker watched him go, his mind racing. The soldier's words echoed in his head, stirring something deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just guilt or shame, it was a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that refused to be extinguished. The bearded biker, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He grabbed the younger biker by the arm, his grip tight and unyielding. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "You just let him walk away? After everything he said?" The younger biker shook off his grip, his expression hardening. "I didn't let him do anything," he said. I didn't see the point in making things worse." The bearded biker stared at him, his eyes narrowing. "You're going soft," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're forgetting who you are." "Maybe I am," the younger biker shot back. "Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending to be someone I'm not." The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do. They had always followed the bearded biker's lead, but now, for the first time, they were starting to question him. The younger biker's defiance had planted a seed of doubt, and it was beginning to take root. The bearded biker sensed it too, and it only made him angrier. "You think you're better than us now?" he snarled. "You think you can just walk away from everything we've built?" The younger biker didn't answer right away. He looked around at the group, at the faces of the men he had called brothers for so many years. They were tough, hardened by life, but he could see the cracks in their armor, the same cracks he had been trying to ignore in himself. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," he said finally. "But I do know that this isn't who I want to be anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. The other bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their loyalty to the group warring with the doubts that had been stirred up by the soldier's words. The bearded biker took a step forward, his face red with anger. "If you walk away now, you're dead to us," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You hear me? Dead." The younger biker didn't flinch. He had made his decision, and he wasn't going to back down. "Then I guess I'm dead," he said quietly. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the group behind. The other bikers watched him go, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. The bearded biker stared after him, his fists clenched, but he didn't try to stop him. Inside the bar, the patrons had been watching the scene unfold through the windows. They had seen the soldier walk away, and now they saw the younger biker do the same. The tension in the air was thick, but there was something else too, a sense of relief, of hope. The younger biker didn't look back as he walked down the street. He didn't know where he was going or what he would do next, but for the first time in a long time, he felt free. As he turned the corner, he saw the soldier standing a few feet away, leaning against a lamppost. The soldier looked up as he approached, his expression calm but curious. "You didn't have to do that," the soldier said. The younger biker shrugged. "Yeah, I did," he said. "I couldn't keep pretending." The soldier nodded, his eyes searching the younger man's face. "What's your name?" he asked. The younger biker hesitated for a moment before answering. "It doesn't matter," he said. "Not anymore." The soldier didn't press him. He could see the pain in the younger man's eyes, the weight of the decision he had just made. "You know," he said, "it takes a lot of courage to walk away from something like that." The younger biker let out a bitter laugh. "Courage," he said. "I don't know about that. I couldn't keep living like that. Not after what you said." The soldier nodded again, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to figure everything out right now," he said. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'll be around." The younger biker looked at him, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he asked. "After everything that happened back there?" The soldier smiled faintly. "Because I've been where you are," he said. "And I know how hard it is to walk away. But I also know it's worth it." The younger biker didn't respond right away. He just stood there, staring at the ground, his mind racing. Finally, he looked up at the soldier and nodded. "Thanks," he said quietly. The soldier nodded back, then pushed off the lamppost and started walking down the street. The younger biker watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a chance to start over. And that was enough. The younger biker stood alone on the quiet street, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He glanced back toward the bar, half expecting the bearded biker and the others to come storming after him, but the street remained empty. The night was still, the only sound the faint hum of a distant car engine. He took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, and for the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of clarity. He didn't know where to go, or what to do next. His life had revolved around the biker group for so long that walking away felt like stepping into the unknown. But as he stood there, the soldier's words echoed in his mind, "It's never too late to change." He started walking, his boots scuffing against the pavement. His thoughts were a whirlwind, memories of the life he was leaving behind, fears about the future, and a faint glimmer of hope that he couldn't quite shake. He didn't have a plan, but he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't go back. Meanwhile, back at the bar, the atmosphere was tense. The bearded biker was seething, his face flushed with anger as he paced back and forth. The other bikers sat in silence, their usual bravado replaced by unease. The younger biker's departure had shaken them, and the soldier's words had left a mark, whether they wanted to admit it or not. One of the bikers, a man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a snake coiled around his arm, finally broke the silence. "What now?" he asked, his voice low. The bearded biker stopped pacing and glared at him. "What do you mean, what now?" he snapped. "We move on. That's what we do." But the shaved-head biker didn't look convinced. "He was one of us," he said. "If he can walk away, what's stopping the rest of us?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding each other's eyes. The bearded biker's face darkened, but he didn't respond. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. Inside the bar, the patrons had returned to their drinks, but the energy in the room had shifted. The confrontation outside had left everyone on edge, but it had also sparked something, a conversation, a realization. People who had been strangers just an hour ago were now talking in hushed tones, sharing their thoughts on what had happened. One man, a regular who had been sitting at the bar all night, turned to the bartender. "You think they'll come back?" he asked, nodding toward the door. The bartender, an older man with a weathered face, shrugged. "Hard to say," he said. "But I'll tell you one thing, that soldier? He's got guts. Not many people can stand up to a group like that and walk away unscathed." The regular nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah," he said. Makes you think, doesn't it? Outside, the younger biker had wandered to a nearby park. He sat on a bench, staring at the ground, his mind still racing. He didn't know how long he had been sitting there when he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up, half expecting to see the bearded biker or one of the others, but it was the soldier. The soldier sat down on the bench beside him, his posture relaxed, but his expression serious. "You all right?" he asked. The younger biker shrugged. "I don't know," he said honestly. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." The soldier nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's not easy," he said. "Walking away from something like that. But it's worth it. You'll see." The younger biker didn't respond right away. He just sat there, staring at his hands, his mind a jumble of thoughts and emotions. Finally, he looked at the soldier. "Why did you come back?" he asked. The soldier smiled faintly. "Because I've been where you are," he said. "And I know how lonely it can feel. But you're not alone. Not unless you want to be." The younger biker let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging with the weight of everything he had been carrying. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "You already are," the soldier said. "You took the first step. That's the hardest part." The two men sat in silence for a while, the night stretching out around them. The younger biker didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he had a chance to start over, to be someone different. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Weeks passed, and life in the small town slowly returned to normal. The bar where the confrontation had taken place became a quiet place again, though the memory of that night lingered in the air like a ghost. The regulars still came in for their drinks, but every now and then, someone would bring up the soldier and the bikers, and the conversation would turn thoughtful. The soldier had left town shortly after the incident, returning to his base to continue his service. But before he left, he made sure to check in on the younger biker. The two men had formed an unlikely bond, one born out of mutual respect and understanding. The soldier had given the younger man his contact information, telling him to reach out if he ever needed help. For the younger biker, those weeks were a time of transformation. He had cut ties with the group completely, though it hadn't been easy. The bearded biker had tried to reach out a few times, his messages filled with anger and threats, but the younger man had ignored them. He knew he couldn't go back, not after everything that had happened. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life. He found a job at a local garage, fixing cars and motorcycles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it gave him a sense of purpose. He started saving money, something he had never done before, and even enrolled in a night class at the community college. It was a small step, but it felt like a new beginning. One evening, as he was closing up the garage, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, half expecting to see the bearded biker or one of the others, but it was the soldier. He looked different out of uniform, more relaxed, but there was still a quiet strength in his demeanor. "Hey," the soldier said, smiling faintly. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." The younger man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'm okay," he said. "Better than I was, anyway." The soldier leaned against a nearby car, his arms crossed. "That's good to hear," he said. "You've come a long way." The younger man shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know about that," he said. "I've still got a long way to go. But I'm trying." The soldier nodded, his gaze steady. "That's all anyone can ask for," he said. "You're doing the right thing, even if it doesn't always feel like it." The two men talked for a while, sharing stories and experiences. The younger man opened up about his past, about the choices he had made and the regrets he carried. The soldier listened without judgment, offering advice and encouragement when he could. As the night wore on, the younger man felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He still had doubts and fears, but he also had hope, a belief that he could change, that he could be someone better. Before he left, the soldier clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got this," he said. just keep moving forward. And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." The younger man nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thanks," he said. "For everything." The soldier smiled back, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. The younger man watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The lesson. The story of the soldier and the bikers spread through the town, becoming a kind of legend. People talked about it in hushed tones, marveling at the soldier's courage and the younger biker's transformation. But more than that, it became a lesson, a reminder that change is possible, no matter how far gone someone might seem. The soldier's calm demeanor and unwavering principles had shown everyone that hate and anger don't have to define us. That even in the face of adversity, we can choose kindness, understanding, and courage. For the younger biker, the lesson was even more personal. He had learned that it's never too late to change, to walk away from a life that no longer serves you. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but he had taken the first step. And that, in itself, was a victory. As for the bearded biker and the rest of the group, their story was less clear. Some said they had disbanded, their unity shattered by the events of that night. Others claimed they had doubled down on their hatred, becoming even more entrenched in their ways. But for those who had witnessed the confrontation, the message was clear: hate is a choice, and so is change. And in the end, it's up to each of us to decide which path we'll take. The soldier's response that night had shocked everyone, not because it was violent or dramatic, but because it was rooted in something far more powerful: compassion. And in a world that often feels divided, that's a lesson worth remembering.